Hello everyone, it's Kira here. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome to TYA, a part tea party, part talk show where I get to sit down with the latest and greatest TYA or Theater for Young Audiences professionals to talk about their past, present, and vision for the future in this industry. And for all of you returning, are you sick of me yet? I sure hope not, because I know for a fact you are not going to want to miss out on our guest today. She is one of the co-artistic directors of an Emmy award-winning performance collective, Manual Cinema. Everyone please welcome Sarah Fornace.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
It's so good to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so for those of you who are less familiar with Manual Cinema's work, they are known for combining handmade shadow puppetry, cinematic techniques, and innovative sound and music in order to create these amazing immersive experiences for both the stage and the screen, which I personally think is one of the coolest things on the planet. No one can convince me otherwise. So I feel very lucky to be talking to you today, Sarah.
Oh, thanks, Kira.
Of course. So now, per usual, we are going to start this interview off in classic tea party style, because we can't have a tea party without discussing what your favorite type of tea is, whether you're drinking it right now or not. So if you have a favorite type of tea, what would that be?
Oh, good question. Well, I do love matcha. I love like green teas in general, but I also love anything with bergamot in it. So yeah, Earl Grey's.
Yeah. I know matcha is a contentious topic in my apartment. We have like one roommate who loves matcha and everyone else who is like kind of skeptical about it. But yeah, those are amazing teas. I personally, I actually feel like I have to explain my mug because I actually am not a mom, but I'm often cast as moms in production. So I was given this mug by one of my like theater children in one of those productions. So it says "Awesome Mom," which is great.
Theater.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm drinking rooibos today, which is one of my favorite teas. It's actually called Fable Tea at one of our local like coffee shops, which I think is just so cute. Fable Tea. Yeah. Awesome. Well, now that we've gotten the most important question out of the way, I would love to talk about how Manual Cinema's innovative style of art came to be in the first place.
Yeah, good question. So Manual Cinema, we're 10 years old, and we started in Chicago. And I always say I feel like we couldn't have started anywhere else, because Chicago has such an ensemble like ethos to it. People are just excited to like come together like in a group and make art, and make weird interdisciplinary art. People aren't really hung up about like, oh, I am a dancer and I can only do this, or I'm a puppeteer and I only do that. So yeah, Manual Cinema, Julia and I, two are the artistic directors, were working at Red Moon Theater back in the day, doing a lot of circus arts and physical theater and outdoor work, and some puppetry. And Julia found an overhead projector in her garage, and she had this idea for like a female-driven spirit quest story, like a short 20-minute piece about a young girl who lives in a satellite array and becomes obsessed with this like siren song from these musicians, travels out of her home, her array, to go seek them, only to find that they're kind of like corporate shells, that they're like empty and not the thing that she was seeking. And the thing that she was seeking wasn't external to her. And it sounded like a great idea actually for like a short film, is how Julia envisioned it. So she came to me and she was like, let's use this overhead projector, and let's make a puppet show. And unfortunately, I was in a Looking Glass show at the time and I couldn't do it, but I was like, hey, you should talk to my partner, Drew Durr, who's a writer and illustrator. So they got together and started making like storyboards for the short piece. And then Julia was at, I think it was like a house show, and saw Kyle and Ben, who are the last two artistic directors. She saw their band. And when she was listening to their band, she was like, oh, this sound is really perfect for the story that I'm envisioning. Maybe they'll let me sample some of their stuff. So she cold emailed them, and they came back and said, well, actually, you know, we're also classically trained composers and like experimental sound designers. Would you like to score us to score this for you, like a film? And of course she was like, yes. So we all kind of like came together for this project, and not with like grand ideas of like, let's form a company and be around for 10 years, but it's like, let's make this story happen. And that first story was called The Ballad of Lula Del Rey, and we performed it everywhere. We performed in a lot of bars. We performed at the Whistler and at Kohl's and Logan Square. We the very first premiere of it was at the Puppeteers Festival that was organized by Mike Olian, who is now one of the co-artistic directors of the Rough House, which is like an incredible other puppet company in town. So we were all kind of like youngins who had like met each other at Red Moon and at Blair Thomas and Company, and were trying out different things. So yeah, it started out like really small and then grew from there.
That's really amazing. I love how art can just pop up anywhere, you know, especially here in Chicago. It's what I love so much about the art in this city. Amazing. And then we're obviously in a time where theater as an industry just has to be very innovative. And since you're so well practiced with innovation, with this fun art form that you've created with all of the other co-artistic directors, I'm wondering if you have any advice or philosophies when it comes to pushing the boundaries of what live performance can be.
Yeah, totally. You know, I think when you're thinking about pushing boundaries, especially like technical boundaries, you just want to be really clear about like what story you want to tell and what experience you want the audience to have. And then make sure that your experimentation and especially your like relationship with tech feeds into that story, because I think it can be very seductive to get like really excited about some kind of like technical like piece of wizardry at the expense of the story. So then it becomes about the tech. So, you know, manual cinema, yeah, we kind of reinvent like what is manual cinema for every single show, but it really starts from the story. So for instance, our show, The End of TV, which is about dementia, it's like set in the 90s. One of the ideas was the internal state of this character was like made up of like commercials and QVC and like TV spots. Like that was like her like internal consciousness. And she herself, she was a hoarder and she was like addicted to QVC. So from that, we were like, okay, we know that television is an important part of this. Like what are some tools and tricks that television has that would speak to like making this world of the character? And that's how we came up with using a green screen. So we could do those like fast, like quick channel changes that you can do on TV, but then it also like represented the like flickering of attention and flickering of focus that was happening in this character with dementia's mind. So that, yeah, I feel like that's like a good example that we didn't start out to be like, hey, green screen is cool. Like what can we do with it? Same thing for Frankenstein is that the story has kind of a nesting doll structure. So it's got a series of frames. The outer frame is Victor Frankenstein telling his story to the sea captain, and actually the sea captain writing letters to his sister, Frankenstein telling his story, and then in the center, the creature telling his story to Frankenstein. So when we took that for manual cinema, we were like, oh, it feels like each part of the nesting doll needs like a different type of storytelling, like a different visual world. And then we started asking ourselves what visual world carried the perspectives of those characters. So we came up with like a moving camera for the creature because it felt very intimate. It allowed us to do point of view shots. The creature is like the beating heart of the show. So we wanted an emotional form of cinematic storytelling. Versus Victor Frankenstein, right? Like in the book, you don't quite trust him. Like the sea captain is so excited that this like gentleman is there, you know? So like you get the sense that no one is taking his story with a grain of salt. So we wanted to get that unreliableness, and we were like, oh, let's choose a form that has a lot of like facade in it, that has a lot of like over the top characterization. And that's how we landed on silent film. And then for Mary Shelley's story, again, we were looking for something that felt like it had an emotional truth to it, and we went back to shadow puppetry, which is kind of our original form, because even though it doesn't have facial expressions or words, it has these kind of like emotional gestures and leaves a space for the audience to kind of project themselves into the characters. And we really wanted that so that you would go along with Mary kind of as our focalization point for the show.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about like audience experiences and like what experience do you want to give an audience. And I actually had a question about like in creating manual cinema, what was the new experience you wanted to bring to the theater scene? It kind of sounds like you started addressing it in that like your experience kind of changes every show and you're adapting the new tech elements and new approaches that you're bringing to the theater scene to match that experience.
Yeah, and we wanted like everyone to be able to come see the show because actually it's pretty experimental, like nonverbal like shadow puppets and like really beautiful dense music. But what we started out doing was we kind of made posters so it felt like film, and we would advertise it. We were trying to like get people who normally say wouldn't come to the theater to see an experimental puppet show to be like, oh, it's just a movie. Like you love movies, like come see a movie with us. And then once we got there, we wanted to make sure we took care of them so that we were like telling a story that welcomed in everyone and that they could take away a journey from. But really the ultimate experience of a manual cinema show really was a happy accident that we stumbled upon it. And I would say like if we hadn't, like we might not still be here. Because when we first started out, we performed behind the screen. So no one could kind of see how we were making it. And people thought, is this like a weird animation? Like what am I actually seeing? So from there, we started doing something we call puppet time, which is after the show, we bring everyone up, we let them touch the puppets, they ask questions, they like practice being in shadow. And we still do that like every single show to this day. Like up until the very last show we did before being shut down for COVID, we had people up on stage. But it really didn't, the show themselves, like there was like a piece missing, or it was obscuring itself in some way. And actually we had done a feature length version of Lula, that short piece, we remade it into a long hour, 15-minute piece. And we put it up at the Den, and the Parks District came to us, and the curator for Theater on the Lake said, hey, would you like to do it at Theater on the Lake this summer? And we were thrilled. It was the first time we were produced. And we had to get like a tax number so that they could pay us. But we installed ourselves in Theater on the Lake, which at the time was that whole building. So there's this giant airplane hangar of a building, and the show was in a thrust, and this audience was huge. And our screen is only 6 feet by 9 feet because it needs to be sized to be a medium shot around the human body. So if we were to make the screen bigger on the ground, all of the shots would change. The composition would be totally different. So we kind of came up with the idea of like, oh, let's put a big screen above in a place where everyone can see it, and we'll just live feed it up. And at first we set ourselves up like normal behind the screen and live fed it, but then we realized, oh, if we're live feeding it, we can do whatever we want down on the stage. So that was the very first time we actually turned around the setup under like a big screen and realized, oh, actually, this is the experience of manual cinema. This is like what we've always wanted. Like at the top, you can see this clean film image, but at the bottom, you can see the like human like sweat and madness of like 4 people, like, and 500 puppets, like puppets flying, people like running up to the screen, like diving and sliding, the musicians like playing and like hitting all their loop pedals. So you get this like messy human liveness and this clean cinematicness at the same time. And then the audience gets choice. So there's like, we really want to like give the audience agency, because I do feel like it's not just film. I think theater too, like really wants to control the gaze sometimes, really say, look here on stage and now track your eye over here. But instead we wanted to say, hey, you're not gonna be able to watch everything. So you're gonna miss something, and that's okay, because there's no wrong way to watch a show. And your experience of the show might be different than the person next to you, and that's what we want. So you could watch the screen the whole time, or you can watch the puppeteers the whole time, or you can like live edit your own experience by like moving your eyeballs around and make your own essential cut of the show. And that's perfect too.
That's awesome. Yeah, really bringing that immersive aspect in there, and that like everyone, gets their own experience, as you were saying, of the show. And really like diving into you don't just see the tip of the iceberg of the production, you see the entire thing. I love that, all the nitty gritty, it's amazing. And then going back to this idea of theater as an industry having to be very innovative right now, if you could name like one thing that you hope this mass push for innovation, this scramble probably would be a better word for it, what that scramble for innovation may bring to the theater and live performance world, like what would you say that would be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think I'm so excited about the conversations that are going on now about who gets to make theater, who gets paid to make theater, what we ask of theater artists, and is it fair or is it exploitative? Like whose voices are centered. And I feel like there's a lot of like extremely good conversations going on with that right now. And hopefully in this pause for theater, they'll be able to be like a tearing apart and a reworking of mechanisms so that when it comes back, it comes back in a more like fair, just, and equitable way. And it just makes me excited for like, what are all the stories that weren't allowed to be told in these like really established pipelines, and now that the pipelines have been paused, like all these stories that I will get to see as an audience member that, you know, have kind of been unfairly like pushed aside or just never produced.
Yeah. Yeah, and like speaking of stories, I know Manual Cinema has produced so many different types of stories, from like adaptations to original stories, to collaborations with so many artists, including your upcoming production of Leonardo and Sam with Mo Willems and the Kennedy Center, which is so exciting. But that makes me wonder, like, how do you decide what stories you're going to tell? What goes into that process?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know, there's two different tracks in manual cinema. So we say we've got an internal track where the manual cinema artistic directors essentially pitch ideas. So like Frankenstein and Ada Ava and End of TV, these were all ideas that came from one manual cinema artistic director. And then we all kind of like work together to flesh it out and make the story. Ooh, sorry, let me stop that.
Okay. It's the nitty gritty. We're seeing human life right now.
Sorry about that. Since manual cinema, like we all have like Google phones, like everything is like integrated around my Gmail. Where was I? Okay, yeah, so there's two tracks for manual cinema to come up with shows. One is the internal track where the artistic directors come up with an idea and pitch it to each other and work on it there. And for that track, you know, we might have a lot of ideas that we're sitting on that we need to get funded. So we need a commissioner to come on board. We need someone to want to premiere it. So, you know, we have a list of all of those. And when there's opportunity, we run with them, try to get them funded and made. And that's really how we started out, was with these internal original shows, Ada Ava and Lula Del Rey. And for those, we actually just kind of like self-produced internally ourselves, because the materials were cheap. It's all like paper and acetate, but the expensive thing was time. So we were all working other jobs, and we were just like making puppets and storyboards and demo video, like as every spare scrap of minute. But then another large track of manual cinema is like for hire or commission pieces. So people will come to us and say, hey, it's the centenary of Gwendolyn Brooks. Can you collaborate with us and produce a show about her life and her work? Miami, the Poetry Festival might say to us, hey, we've got a loading dock that's empty and like a big parking lot. It's got a beautiful tree in it. Would you like to do an immersive piece about Lorca? Like, so you have the site, you have Lorca's poetry, go. And those I feel are kind of like equally exciting. Even if the story idea doesn't come internally, it opens up like incredible like collaboration opportunities, and also incredible opportunities to work with stories that I might not have thought of myself, which actually ends up often being better.
Yeah, allowing the world around you and the people around you to shape your art. I think that's really wonderful. And then kind of building off of the ideas of what stories you decide to tell. I'm wondering what inspired Manual Cinema to finally start pursuing TYA, because I know the Magic City went up in 2017, which is 7 years after Manual Cinema was created. So what inspired that shift?
Yeah, good question. You know, and people had always asked us, because like I think puppets are often associated with TYA, even though, yeah, there's like amazing puppetry TYA shows, but also puppets can be for all ages. And there's definitely some puppet shows that shouldn't be seen by children. Like the medium itself is like very like fluid and fits to a lot of different storytelling. But we had the opportunity to make a show with Chicago Children's Theater, and they were interested in an adaptation of something that was in the public domain. And we decided we really wanted to adapt the Magic City. And Edith Nesbit, was kind of one of the inventors of this kind of like urban fantasy where like characters like in the real world, like go through like a portal to another world that we're familiar with from like Narnia and from J.K. Rowling and from Diane Wynne Jones. And Edith Nesbit was doing it very early on. And her work like often had like political component too. Like in the Magic City, there's it's got kind of this like 10 labors of Hercules structure. And like one of the things they have to do is convince this town that's run by this giant sloth to like change their ways. Unfortunately, that didn't make it into our version of the show, but reading it was pretty wild. And the Magic City was just we were so excited to tell a story about characters these age. And I would say we called it like an all ages show because we really wanted it to be like the shows that we loved as kids, kind of specifically the movies. We're thinking a lot about the Neverending Story. We're thinking a lot about the Labyrinth. We're thinking a lot about really from the 80s and 90s, like the things that like we grew up on. And we wanted it to appeal not only to children who are children today, but to adults who were like children back then. So we're trying to get like different levels of humor. So there's some like Patrick Swayze jokes in there that definitely the 5-year-old audience probably is like, I don't know, like VHS tapes, cassette tapes. There's like old media in there that just doesn't exist anymore, I think, for kids probably. And yeah, I mean, when we were working on it is one of the favorite projects we had done so far, because I think we put a lot of ourselves in it. Like one of the favorite things that Philomena does is have breakfast for dinner with her older sister, like who is like her caretaker. And I remember loving breakfast for dinner nights at my home when like my dad would make pancakes. And just again, it was like a story that allowed us to play with the form. So it was the first time that we had a narrator. We really felt like one of the things we needed to do to make it more inclusive of all ages was to bring language into it, because there is a lot of like mental work that goes on when you have characters with no facial expression and no words, and we wanted to be able to bring different like valences of audience members at different ages and different kind of mental ability to like parse through those emotional interactions between characters. And it also just like felt right because the book has such an amazing narrative voice, and we were like, that narrative voice needs to be part of it. Oh, it should be a character, a person on stage. So Marian, who's the voice of the show, who sings the theme song, is also narrates with like a mixture of words from the book and words that like we wrote. It also, something about that story is that, Philomena loves to make stuff out of junk, which is what we do too. She uses found objects out of her house, and we use scraps of paper. So she makes this, like city out of junk and then gets sucked inside of it. And that was like a really fun prompt for us to like kind of get to make this like fantasy world that's inspired by like household objects, and also to make this real world inspired kind of by like Nickelodeon cartoons was like the aesthetic we were working with. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. And as soon as we made it, I was like, oh man, I want to do this more often. Especially because I feel like TYA, like we get a little bit more license to like make really joyous endings. I don't know why. In our adult shows, for some reason we work with tragedy a lot. Like the endings are hopeful, but also heavy. And the end of the Magic City is just like straight up joy. And as a performer, it feels really good to go on a journey with an audience that just ends in kind of like pure joy.
Yeah, we always emphasize how like TYA lives in a realm of hope, which is always so lovely, because you can't have the next generation, you can't not have them have hope. They have to go forth and blaze a trail in the world. So it's nice to be able to light that little spark at the end of shows.
Yeah. I think that's why TYA feels so important, or it feels more important to me than creating the adult shows, because it's like, oh, this is the next generation of like citizen and human being. Like hopefully these like stories that we tell, especially we really want to tell stories about empathy, so that they can kind of like take that away with them in some small way, hopefully, as they like grow up and take for society.
Yeah. And oh, so I'm looking at my notes here. I have a little paper. But now you're in production for your second TYA show, which is super exciting, Leonardo and Sam. And how is that going? I would just love to chat about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's been really exciting to work on. So I'm adapting and directing that one. And we met with Mo in New York when we were there doing a show. And he and the Kennedy Center pitched the two books, Leonardo, A Terrible Monster, and Sam, the Most Scaredy Cat Kid in the World. And we just love the books. They're so smart. They're so incredibly smart. The way they used like oversized pages to get the sense that, the world is too big for these characters. Like Sam is scared because the world isn't made for him. And the way that he like uses the expanse of the page and composition to track the eye, it's like very cinematic, but it also really has something to do with the phenomenology of reading. Like in the same way that like we think about, like how can we use the form of manual cinema to tell our story? Like the form of the books, like really tells the story of this small monster who's sad that he's terrible at being a monster, terrible at being a terrible monster. And so when we dove into it, we wanted to like expand their world that was like in these two stories, into like a full kind of feature length theatrical cinematic journey. And we kind of got to unpack a lot of the themes that were in the story and ask ourselves, like, what are the big questions and big challenges that we want to put on stage and have the kids in the audience go through with these characters? And, we landed on themes like it's okay to be scared. Because if you're not scared about something, like you don't have the option to be brave, to make a choice that even though you're experiencing this fear, you're going to reach out to someone or go forward anyway. Also the idea that like big emotions can really pile up. And if you keep them inside, like building blocks are going to stack and stack and stack until they get too high and they fall over and they all spill out in a kind of like a giant, like catastrophe. But instead, like what are other options we have to like have our big emotions and share them in a way that is productive and doesn't cause a collapse, but maybe causes you to like reach out and form a new connection with someone, because other people are having those big emotions too, and you might not see their big emotion walls, but they have them, and they might need some help as well. So, and those are like big themes and big questions and feel really important. So yeah, we're like tackling like questions that I feel like is at the heart of the human experience, but at the same time, I'm getting to like look at scraps of fur as we make our like on-camera puppets. Or getting to storyboard really fun sequences where like Leonardo like goes to the library to like do research to like solve his problem. Because I also feel like that's something like really important that we wanted to put in the show. That's like, hey kids, like you have all the information in the world at your fingertips. Like how do you go about going through it to like ask questions about the world and find answers that you can trust and that are reliable? Like informational literacy seems vitally important in 2020.
Oh yeah, I can agree. And I was going to actually ask about what manual cinema hopes to bring to the story in adapting them, which I think you actually just answered, and that you're expanding a lot of the themes within this story, which is so amazing, bringing in new conversations and just marrying like the cinematic style of Mo Willems with manual cinema style, which is so cool. I know I was in a playwriting sequence class where we got to do the lunchtime doodles with Mo.
Oh, cool, yes.
Yeah, specifically one for Leonardo the Terrible Monster and Sam the Scaredy Cat Kid. What a fun coincidence.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I can definitely concur about the cinematic style because we were actively doodling them with him, which was so much fun. Check out Lunchtime Doodles with Mo if you haven't already. It's amazing.
Yeah, I watched the first couple of them and yeah, just extraordinary.
Yeah. So going back to like this process with Leonardo and Sam, what would you say is your favorite part of the artistic process when it comes to bringing a show to life?
Oh, good question. I do love the storyboarding process where like the ideas become concrete on the page and we can start seeing the shots together, and seeing the visual world of the show. But actually, I have to say, my favorite really is like being in rehearsal, whether I'm directing or whether I'm acting, is like being in the room with like other human beings. And we've done all this pre-production, you know, we feel like we found out a lot about this story, but like actually it doesn't like live and breathe until we're all in the room together. And that's really the difference for me between the film projects we make and the theater projects. Yeah, and I love, you know, we haven't gotten to do that yet for Leonardo and Sam, but we did get to do auditions via Zoom. It was the first time doing auditions via Zoom because we were all shut down in the pandemic. And even just watching all of these extraordinary actors, like Chicago has so much talent, doing manual cinema style puppetry for the first time, like using this box, you know, and using like forks and found objects around this camera was like really heart opening and kind of newly made me excited about the show, because I was like, oh, this is it. It's like human beings moving around pieces of paper in front of you to tell the story.
Yeah. And this is more out of my curiosity than anything else, but like what do, I know you're not in rehearsals yet for Leonardo, but what do rehearsals look like right now? I think Dream Delivery Service went up for your 10th anniversary, like little production thing that you did. So what did rehearsals look like for that?
Yeah, so what we've really been doing now is just working with the artistic directors in terms of trying to keep our numbers like way down, and you know what we feel safe doing like in the studio. So my partner Drew and I, we are quarantined together. So we were two of the three, and then Julia, the other artistic director, was the other puppeteer. So we all wore masks, like every moment we weren't on camera and needed to be without a mask. We wrote masks into the show to like enable like more like mask wearing, where Julia and I needed to be near each other. And we social distance. So Drew and I were, you know, could work more closely together, and Julia was trying to stay 6 feet apart around the screen. So that like is some of the reason we ended up using miniatures. We used the cranky. So like that became an ingredient of the show, which is like COVID safety. And then the two other artistic directors, Kyle and Ben, they did the music, and they were like all the way like 25 feet away on the other side of the studio, 6 feet apart. And then our sound engineer, Mike, and everyone's wearing masks, is outside in the hallway. So like in his own space on the other side of a door. And then our stage manager was doing the video queuing, and she was like on yet another section of the studio. So we socially distanced out, even though we were in an indoor space together. And you know, we had masks and we had gloves and we had disinfectant as well. So yeah, we were thinking a lot about safety, and we're as we learn more, we're trying to like use that process going along. We're about to do a run of the Christmas Carol. That's going to be our next COVID safe production that'll open up in December. So right now we're working on the story for that. We're about to go into pre-production on the puppets, and we're asking ourselves the same thing, like how can we build the show in a way that makes it safe for people to stay distant from each other and stay healthy.
Awesome. I love that it's Christmas already in your world. We just decorated for Halloween here.
I love Halloween.
One of the best holidays, I have to say. And I just love hearing about that rehearsal process. I think it personally gives me a lot of hope in terms of like art can live on and persist and like be amazing. I really love Dream Delivery Service. So that it's great to hear about how that rehearsal process is functioning and creating such amazing productions. I know a middle school teacher reached out to us recently, and she was like, what companies can we look to give my students hope that like the art that they are pursuing can still happen? Because right now, like, it seems a little grim. So one of the first recommendations I gave was manual cinema, because I was like, look at what they can do right now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that. Amazing. So coincidentally, our theater company, the Purple Crayon Players, is putting up a production called Scaredy Cat Presents. Sam the Scaredy Cat Kid, Scaredy Cat Presents, lots of scaredy cats everywhere. Scaredy Cat Presents is by Janine Brighton, and it centers on 11-year-old Catherine, whose passion is stop motion filmmaking. So she uses like play figurines and moves them around to create these amazing productions. And so I hear that we're actually going to get a sneak peek into like Manual Cinema's like filmmaking process. You have some puppets for us today, I believe.
Yeah, I brought some puppets from Magic City. Yeah, and hopefully this style puppetry could be useful as you're working with the characters like filmmaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of these puppets they were like illustrated and then scanned in. They're just pieces of paper taped to little sticks. And they're made to be used with a camera like a GoPro or like your video camera on your computer to like create the world. So like a puppeteer might hold these tree branches in, you know, and I as a character might be like underneath the tree, you know, like if we're trying to like set location.
Yeah.
Same thing, like if we're trying to, one of the places that Philomena goes is like Boston Market. She loves, that's like where she goes on her birthday. So again, this is, rather than having to build a whole giant set of Boston Market, which is hard, especially for a shot that's only 2 seconds long. It's just a piece of paper with some black paper on the back on a stick. And that allows you to, it's a little bit easier when I'm on the edge of the table, but it allows you to do kind of like zooms. You can like set the scene. She could be, this is my little Philomena puppet. Oh, for her 10th birthday. I pulled these out of storage. So you can move stuff in the background to get the sense of like a tracking shot that she's like moving past. You know, you can zoom into her and see her face and then move back out as she's like running through the environment. The way she moves like tells you how she feels, you know, how excited she is about her birthday. It also lets us do a little bit more like narrative stuff. So this is Philomena and Helen building one of their magic cities, building stuff out of junk. And these kind of were like a ballet of like montage. So like in a film, we would have like a montage of like them building together. And again, this wants to move really fast. So just getting the actors in and out in front of the camera, like you want to save that for scenes that feel important because it takes time to do it versus the idea of the muchness of like them building many things over the years. You can just make a bunch of illustrations of them over the years and kind of fly them past the camera to get that feeling of montage and of accumulation. So it's a really, and again, just pieces of paper. And we scan these in so that we can print out new ones because on the road you have to do like hundreds of shows and the puppets fall apart. But especially if your audience is at home, like want to make movies like the character in your show, they can just like draw this on paper and cut it out and then practice moving it around the camera on their computer. Same thing, all of the props. This is the spatula for breakfast for dinner. Like lives in that kind of like Nickelodeon cartoon world. Yeah, and you can have like also like action shots, I say, like are really fun to do with puppets. So if you got a chase scene or like you want to do like dinosaurs or like in this case, like she's like falling down like a really long way. She's like, ah. Hard to do, you know, we're not going to put an actor on wires. And again, because like it'd be take a really long time for the actor to get in and out of wires. So like we do it with a puppet.
That's amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
That's lovely. And the idea that she's like paper on sticks is amazing. It's so accessible to do at home, which brings up a challenge for our viewers. So if you were to create a movie using something other than live actors or using something along with live actors, such as these amazing puppets that Sarah just showed us, what would it be? You can tell us in the comments, or you can show us by creating your own little video and sending it to playgroundtyafestival@gmail.com. That will be in the description, don't worry. And you can also just like post it on any of or send it to us to post on any of our social medias, which can also be found in the description. In the meantime, go see Leonardo and Sam when it premieres. Do we have a date for that yet, Sarah?
Yeah, so it is premiering early next year. It'll be premiering in February.
Amazing, cool. So go check that out in February. And then also come and see Scaredy Cat Presents, which is premiering this Saturday, October 10th at 2 p.m. We'll see you there. Amazing. Bye, Sarah. Thank
Bye.
you so much for coming in. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.